A sunny morning in Flagstaff, Arizona. The birds singing, the neighbors off to work, when a tow truck and two bank officials arrive unexpectedly in the peaceful Brown family neighborhood. And right there, parked triumphantly in the driveway of Kody Brown, is his most cherished possession, his beloved car. In minutes, the car would be gone from him. The scene was surreal. Kody, a man who once swaggered with confidence, arms folded and ego riding high, now stood immobilized as strangers, taped his car with foreclosure documents. His face blanched, his jaw set hard, and the bravado seeped out of him. It wasn't just a vehicle being repossessed. It was a symbol of authority getting away from him. Neighbors peered from behind drapes. Others ventured outside with their phones in hand, softly saying, "Is that Kody Brown? Are they actually taking his car?" Sister Wives fans understand Kody always took pride in appearances. His flashy vehicles, his sense of control, his desire to display success. Yet, in this instant, the very facade he so diligently constructed was destroyed for the world to view. This wasn't repossession, it was humiliation. And the biggest question on everyone's mind was simple. How did Kody let it come to this? For months, rumors of Kody's financial woes had circulated, but fans wrote them off as drama-fueled hearsay. After all, wasn't Kody the patriarch of a once thriving family dynasty, handsomely compensated by TLC for Sister Wives? Didn't he used to strut around enormous houses, luxury land, and visions of a giant family mansion? The reality was less glamorous. Sources had uncovered that Kody had bought his high-end vehicle with a huge loan. Initially, paying for it wasn't a problem. But as family breaks, lawsuits, and increasing costs added up, the payments mounted. Bank warnings began coming in. Letters, phone calls, formal notices. Kody dismissed them, believing he could stall or discover another fiscal loophole. Robyn, his final wife still standing, reportedly begged him to do something. She begged him to negotiate, refinance, something. But Kody's pride would not permit it. He would not concede. He thought he could ride out the pressure. But banks never wait that long. And when the clock on the payment expired, the hammer finally fell. His favorite vehicle was officially repossessed. What Kody wasn't aware of, however, was that this seizure of the car would generate responses among his family members that would be louder than the revving engine of any tow truck. The instant word of the repossession got around, the Brown family's responses couldn't have been more disparate. Christine, separated from Kody for so long, allegedly smirked when she heard the news. He always thought he was above it, she supposedly said. For her, this wasn't simply a matter of a vehicle. It was about years of arrogance finally coming home to roost. Janelle wasn't much slower to weigh in, dubbing the news karma delivered. Fans are well aware she had spent years living under financial strain with Kody, only to leave with a deep appreciation for just how spendthrift he had been with cash. And then there was Meri. Her usual stoic observer, she didn't exactly gloat in the open, but sources say she raised an eyebrow and sneered. Not surprised. From Meri, that one sentence spoke volumes. But whereas all the other wives appeared vindicated, Robyn cried. She wasn't rejoicing, unlike the rest. This repossession was, in her opinion, a public shaming that pulled their reputation further down. To her, this was not merely a car. It was the sole string preserving Kody's image. Witnesses even say she pleaded with the bank officials to change their minds, promising to work something out. But the officials remained adamant. The car was gone. Even neighbors were weighing in, rumors spreading like wildfire. If he can't even keep up with car payments, one neighbor whispered, what else is falling through his fingers? And that was the question that was about to unleash Pandora's box, showing the public a side of Kody's finances they had only just started to wonder about. The repossession of the car proved to be just the beginning. News came in about Kody's bigger financial debacle, overdue property taxes, disputed land claims, and even rumors of unsettled bills piling up behind the scenes. Remember the notorious Coyote Pass project? The big vision of constructing one huge family mansion. It appears much of that vision was paid for on wobbly financial foundations, supported by loans and promises that never really came to fruition. And now, with wives quitting, incomes dwindling, and debt mounting higher, the fractures were unhidden. Fans who had previously praised Kody's aggressive vision were now labeling him reckless. Online communities flashed with outrage. How do you let it get this far? All those years on TV, and he's losing cars to the bank. Others criticized him for living a sham, more concerned with image than substance. The repossession was not only a financial setback, it was the beginning of much greater turmoil. And insiders were talking that the banks were not done, just getting started. Because if they could take his car, what in the world would they be coming for next? For Kody, losing his prized car wasn't merely about getting around. It was about pride, reputation, and dominance. Now, without that symbol, he is confronted with a reality harsher than ever. His family broken, his finances in shambles, and his image in doubt. Kody stands at the precipice of a cliff he might not climb back from. Christine, Janelle, and Meri are moving on. Robyn hangs on for dear life to whatever is left. And Kody, he's stuck with what's left of an empire he never imagined would break apart. The question now is straightforward but haunting. Is this the beginning? If the banks are already repossessing cars, will foreclosures on property and public lawsuits follow? One thing's for sure. The car can be gone, but the soap opera is simply going into overdrive. The morning started much like any other in Flagstaff, Arizona. A cool breeze blew through the suburban neighborhood, sunlight pouring across driveways in front of quiet suburban homes. Children ran bikes down the street, dogs yelped in fenced-in backyards, and neighbors watered the lawn. Everything seemed as normal as could be on the surface. But for Kody Brown, that morning would end up being one of the most embarrassing mornings of his life. At first, all seemed well. He waited outside, arms folded, looking over his property with the same confidence he'd shown for years on Sister Wives. His favorite vehicle shone in the driveway, looking new and clean, the pride and joy of his persona. It wasn't a car, it was a token of his power, his sophistication, his control over his own story. To Kody, that vehicle represented far more than transportation. It was proof to the world that, despite the divorces, despite the cracks in his family, despite the whispers of financial trouble, he was still standing tall. But appearances can crumble in an instant. Out of nowhere, a big tow truck drove slowly into the cul-de-sac. Initially, neighbors thought it was for the usual task. But when the truck drove right in front of Kody's house, there were whispers. Curtains moved. Phones were picked up. Something was going on. And it wasn't a good thing. Two men in black uniforms emerged from the truck. They had no expression on their faces, their body language professional, yet unyielding. He had clipboards and papers under their arms, and approached with the kind of confidence that marked them as not there to negotiate. They were there to enforce. Kody's expression changed instantly. The swagger melted away. His lips tightened, his brow furrowed, and the realization hit him like a brick wall. This wasn't a routine visit, this was repossession. The commanding officer looked at Kody, then at the car. Without pause, he taped a glaring notice onto the windshield. The clipping of paper against glass rang out more clearly than it ought to have done in the stillness of the neighborhood. For a fleeting moment, time froze. And then pandemonium. Neighbors started to whisper, with some taking out their phones to film the moment. One man grumbled to his wife, "Is that Kody Brown, of Sister Wives?" Another whispered in return, "I think they're stealing his car." Half the street seemed to know what was going on within minutes. Kody, on the other hand, exploded. He charged at the officers, demanding explanations. "This is a mistake," he bellowed, his voice cracking between panic and rage. But the men barely reacted. They had forms, they had uniforms, and most importantly, they had the law backing them up. The engine of the tow truck growled to life. The hydraulic boom stretched out, sliding beneath the tires of Kody's precious vehicle. Painfully slowly, the car began to lift. The once proud extension of himself, now hanging in mid-air at the mercy of strangers. To the outside world, it was merely a repossession. But to Kody, it was devastation. This wasn't about losing a car. This was about losing face. His pride, his authority, his well-crafted image, all lost in public view. Imagine the embarrassment. For years, Kody walked across television screens, projecting himself as the self-assured patriarch, the guy who could handle multiple wives, multiple kids, and multiple duties. But now, With his car chained up and driven off, that facade fell apart on live television. And to add insult to injury, he wasn't alone. On the other side of the road, neighbors crossed their arms, smiling nastily. Others took videos, hoping to post the confrontation on social media. And within the Brown family itself, the responses were even more biting. Christine was said to have laughed upon receiving the call. Janelle was said to have shaken her head, saying, "It was bound to happen." Even Meri, who frequently remained silent, was said not to have been surprised. But none of them were like Robyn. She dashed out into the street, her color gone, her tone urgent. "Please," she implored the officials. "There has to be some other way. We can negotiate this." Tears came into her eyes as she gripped the last shreds of dignity. But the bank is not flexible on emotion. The men did not even look at her entreaties. The task was easy. Take the car away, close the case. And so, with Robyn in tears, Kody in fury, and neighbors staring in awed fascination, the truck started to move. The car jolted slightly as it settled into position, secured for good. The screech of rubber on asphalt was ear-splitting. Each inch the truck rolled ahead was another inch of Kody's pride pulled along the street. When it was lost, there was only silence. Kody remained still, his fists balled, his chest heaving with anger. For a man who had spent his entire adult life struggling to keep control, this was a bad dream. But here's the thing. The repossession was merely the symptom. The actual story was much darker. This wasn't just a matter of a single missed payment. It was years of fiscal cracks, finally bursting open wide. It was a man who had believed himself invincible, now being laid bare in the most public, humiliating manner possible. And if the banks were daring enough to take his car, what would they take next? When word of Kody Brown's seizure of his car reached the public domain, many were shocked. How could a man who had been on TV for over a decade, gaining fame, fortune, and exposure, lose something as fundamental as his car to a bank? But it was not an isolated event. It was a symptom, the outward tip of an iceberg that had been developing below the surface for years. Behind the smiles and assertive rhetoric on sister wives, a more sinister narrative was playing out, one about increasing debt, misplaced pride, and refusing to confront reality. Kody was always enamored with status symbols. The blingy cars, the pricey land buys, the assurances of constructing the big house where his family would dwell in harmony. These weren't mere fantasies. They were a means for him to demonstrate to the world that he was in charge, that his polygamist existence wasn't a cross to bear, but something to wear with pride. But the reality is this. Much of it was constructed on credit. Insiders in the family exposed that Kody funded his beloved car in a large loan. Everything seemed fine initially. There were sister wives' paychecks coming in, the family remained whole, and public appearances generated additional income. For Kody, paying that bill was just another tick on a very long list of things to do. But over time, the fissures grew deeper. Christine departed. Janelle left. Meri withdrew. With every wife, Kody lost not just support, but also money. Supporting a family of close to 24 is not inexpensive, and suddenly all that responsibility fell squarely on Kody and Robyn's shoulders. The car loan, once merely a fraction of a larger fiscal equation, started to feel like a shackle around his neck. Banks do not swoop in and take away your car overnight. There are warning signs, loads of them, letters, emails, telephone calls, tacked on late fees. According to sources, Kody had been receiving notice after notice for months. Each one was a warning sign, an opportunity to correct things. But Kody, he dismissed them. Why? Pride. For a man who had his ego wrapped up in being in control, confessing financial difficulty would have been a blow. He kept telling himself he could figure it out later, that anything would materialize to bail him out. Maybe a new cycle of the show. Maybe a speaking engagement. Maybe selling off some of the Coyote Pass property. But later never arrived. And banks don't operate on maybes. Robyn is said to have begged him. She implored him to call, to negotiate, to clarify things. She told him that creditors will work with individuals if they demonstrate good faith. But Kody's obstinacy prevailed. Rather than answering the phone, he left it alone. Rather than opening letters, he pushed them away. To Kody, acknowledging the problem was about acknowledging defeat. And defeat was not something he considered in his world. Instead, here's the reality of debt. It doesn't exist alone. One late car payment will usually reveal something larger. And in Kody's situation, the car was not the only debt racking up. There were taxes on property at Coyote Pass, home maintenance fees on several houses, attorney fees associated with divorces and separations, daily expenses for kids still living in his house. It all cost him. And with Christine and Janelle strutting away, so did their desire to pool the money together. People forget that for years, the Brown wives worked, whether they were selling clothes online, having small businesses, or working on side businesses. That money went into the household. But when they were away, the streams of revenue dwindled significantly. Suddenly, what had been manageable was overwhelming. And the car loan? It was the bank's easiest target to hit first. Every day Kody lived, knowing that one knock on the door could send everything crashing down. That was the reality he lived with in the months leading up to the repossession. In private, however, there was building tension. Robyn saw his nights without sleep, his pacing, his irritability. The children observed the fights, the tension in the air like a storm cloud. But Kody would not acknowledge what was occurring. To him, to admit the car was in danger would be weakness. So he doubled down on appearances. He kept the car immaculate. He drove it proudly up and down through town, revving the engine, challenging the world to ask him why he was so successful. But each time he slid into the driver's seat, he knew the reality: the car was no longer his. It belonged to the bank, and time was of the essence. Banks can wait, but not indefinitely. After months of dismissed warnings, unpaid accounts, and hollow guarantees, the ultimatum was reached: repossess the vehicle. It wasn't about the worth of the vehicle, it was about the message. Kody had ridden his luck too hard, and the bank wanted him to realize they weren't in a game anymore. That tow truck was not a vehicle. It was a hammer crashing down, big and definitive. When those officials affixed that notice to the windshield, it was not merely paperwork. It was a statement. Your time is up. The repossession of Kody's beloved car was not merely one loan. It was a symbol of something bigger: the downfall of the Brown family's dynasty. It revealed the reality that under the glamour of reality television and the illusion of domination, financial anarchy had been brewing for years. Fans who once watched Kody as the assertive leader now watched him as a man trapped by his own ego. And maybe the most heartless twist of all, this was merely the first. Because once banks take one piece of property, they never take just one in total. Which brings us to the million-dollar question. If Kody couldn't hold on to his car, what else was about to be pulled out into the open? When the tow truck towed away, carrying Kody Brown's beloved car from his driveway, it was not just a cost. It was a spectacle. But what followed was more shocking. The responses of his broken family. Every ex-wife, every child, every neighbor, and naturally Robyn, his final faithful mate, had an opinion. And their opinions made the repossession bigger than a fiscal controversy. It was a war in the family. For Christine, the second the news became public was just poetic justice. After years of putting up with Kody's dismissive attitude, arrogance, and emotional abandonment, seeing him trip publicly felt like karma calling at his doorstep. She always felt Kody felt he was above everyone else. A source spilled. And when Christine learned the bank rolled up and repossessed his car, she allegedly laughed. He constructed his life on power and control. She confided to a close friend. Now he can't even control his own payments. Christine had already remade her life many miles away from Kody, beginning anew with her new boyfriend, and relishing her freedom. But that didn't mean she wasn't aware, when cracks began to appear in his painstakingly constructed veneer. For Christine, the repossession was not merely about a car. It was about finally seeing Kody held accountable for consequences he could no longer escape. But Christine wasn't the sole celebrant. Janelle, ever practical and down-to-earth, responded with less humor and more raw reality. She had been shouldering much of the financial burden for years, striving to balance budgets while Kody pursued fantasies of luxury. She recognized the writing on the wall before the tow truck showed up. "This is karma," she was quoted as saying to a close friend. "You can only live above your means for so long before it catches up with you." Fans are familiar with Janelle as the wife who consistently attempted to keep Kody humble, alerting him to impulsive behavior. From buying land to household spending, she was always cautioning him to be careful. But Kody seldom paid attention. To her, the repossession was evidence that turning a blind eye finally leads to open failure. And if anyone was going to utter "I told you so," it was Janelle. Then there was Meri. For years she was the quiet, reserved wife. She didn't yell as much as Christine, and she didn't confront Kody as plainly as Janelle. But don't misread her quiet as agreeance. When Meri heard about the repossession, insiders say she raised an eyebrow and grumbled just 2 words. Not surprised. That one little sentence sliced deeper than any long tirade. It encapsulated years of disillusionment, years of standing by and watching Kody make impulsive decisions as if he had everything in hand. For Meri, the repossession was no surprise. It was a given. And maybe, in her silence, there was even a hint of relief. Relief that she had stepped back in time, before being pulled into the chaos. But whereas Christine, Janelle and Meri appeared to be enjoying the humiliation of Kody, Robyn's response was the polar opposite. If the other wives viewed the repossession as karma, Robyn viewed it as disaster. As soon as the officials showed up, Robyn allegedly collapsed. Sobbing uncontrollably, she begged the bank agents. According to witnesses, she pleaded with them, saying they could work something out if they just gave her and Kody more time. But banks aren't run on emotion. Neighbors had characterized the scene as awkward and painful. As Kody screamed with rage, Robyn cried, desperately struggling to save the dignity of the family. For her, this wasn't only about a car. It was about image. It was about guarding what remained of their public image. Fans are aware that Robyn has always been aggressively protective of appearances. She feared that any slip-up would find itself splashed across tabloids and internet forums. And she was correct. Hours later, pictures of the tow truck and news of the repossession zipped like wildfire around social media. Robyn's breakdown was about more than just losing the car. It was about losing the fight to prevent Kody's faltering empire from collapsing completely in the public sphere. But even her tears couldn't stem the tide of criticism coming their way. Under the glare of the spotlight on the wives, the Brown kids weren't oblivious to what was going on. Several of them had already complained about Kody in recent years, complaining that he was playing favorites and abandoning them. Having his car seized only added to the tension. Some of the older ones allegedly taunted him behind closed doors, calling him out on the hypocrisy of a man who used to lecture them about responsibility now losing his car to the bank. For the younger children still in Robyn's custody, the incident was bewildering and terrifying. Why were strangers taking away their dad's car? Why was mom crying? Why was dad so mad? The repossession wasn't just hitting Kody hard. It had a ripple effect through the family, opening old wounds. And what about outside the family? The fans and neighbors weren't exactly short on opinions. In Flagstaff, news travels quickly. By the time the tow truck drove away from Kody's house, everyone in the neighborhood already knew what had gone down. Some of the neighbors grabbed phones to record, catching Kody's anger and Robyn's tears. Others whispered behind their hands, shaking their heads. "If he can't even make payments on his car," a neighbor hissed, "what's next?" The house, being the object of neighborhood gossip, was humiliating for a man who longed to be respected. Every sideways look, every hushed tone was another stab. And on Twitter, fans were even crueler. Boards were filled with tweets taunting Kody's failure. "Guess the great patriarch couldn't even handle his car loan," one user tweeted. Another contributed, "Christine's probably somewhere laughing her head off right now." The repossession became more than an individual shame. It became a public meme. The car repossession did not bring the Browns together in sympathetic feeling. Rather, it worsened the cracks already dividing the family. Christine, Janelle and Meri separated from him further, their response with vindication dripping. The children lost another notch of respect for Kody. Neighbors ridiculed him, fans pilloried him online. And at the center of it all was Robyn, grasping for dear life to the debris, attempting to keep intact what was already shattered irreparably. The repossession was not merely an economic setback. It was a metaphor. It proved that Kody, who had once been the unassailable patriarch, was fallible, that his empire was not invincible, that his grip was unraveling quicker than he could repair it. And if this was the family's reaction to just one car being seized, imagine what would happen if bigger assets, the houses, the land, the money, started to crumble too. The repossession of Kody Brown's beloved car was astonishing enough in itself, but behind-the-scenes sources soon showed that this was not a one-time slip. The car was merely the first domino to tumble in what seems to be a much larger financial meltdown. As soon as the bank acted, individuals began to dig further, and what they uncovered created a picture of financial irresponsibility that had been building for years. Beneath the glamour of sister wives, the beaming family photos, and the meticulously constructed narratives, a very different reality was concealed. Kody's finances were stretched to the breaking point, resting on a house of cards, and when one card dropped, the whole thing started to totter. It began with what Kody had previously referred to as his visionary plan. Years before, he had bought a massive plot of land in Flagstaff called Coyote Pass. His ambition to construct one enormous house in which all his wives and kids would reside together under one roof. He drew the picture of unity, harmony, and power. On paper, it was great. Reality was a time bomb. The land itself cost millions, and although the purchase appeared grand on television, not many knew how it was funded. Those in the know say loans and accounting tricks were employed to facilitate the sale, not a pile of cash up front. And when the land stood vacant, the bills did not. Property taxes had to be paid, and maintenance was not inexpensive. Years passed and no home was constructed. The vision became a burden. Wives departed. Marriages were broken, and what had been Kody's measure of success became a blaring embarrassment of overreaching. To this day, that parcel of land sits as a vacant testament to his vision failure. And guess what? The unpaid costs tied to Coyote Pass are still hanging over his head. Kody quote, "See, financial troubles didn't stop at land. For years he insisted on buying or renting multiple large homes to keep his plural family comfortable. At one point, there were 4 massive houses spread across different neighborhoods, each one costing thousands per month in mortgages, taxes, insurance, and utilities. When the family relocated to Flagstaff, the cost nearly doubled. Flagstaff is not inexpensive, and managing properties was an uphill battle. The issue? Kody wouldn't downsize. Downsizing equaled losing to him. Losing equaled admitting his vision for keeping everyone together was falling apart. So rather than cutting back, he stretched thinner. Bills mounted, and money that could have been spent on savings or car payments went toward maintaining fronts. And when Christine, Janelle, and Meri began to leave, those homes became an even greater liability. Fans usually think reality personalities are millionaires. And although sister wives did generate revenue, it wasn't the millions fans envision. Reports indicate the family made roughly $250,000. $300,000 per season, divided among Kody, the wives, and the enormous amount of kids. Once you split it, take out taxes and subtract costs, it isn't as glamorous as it seems. With a family of close to 24, the finances were stretched thin in no time. And rather than applying the money from the TV to level out his finances, Kody allegedly pursued additional endeavors, purchased flashy products, and doubled down on image. The car loan that resulted in repossession. It's said by many fans to have been driven by the same motivation, to appear successful even when the budget indicated otherwise. Christine, Janelle, and Meri didn't just pack up their emotional support when they left. They packed up their financial support as well. For years, each of the wives had her own sources of income, whether it was selling clothes through LuLaRoe, having small businesses, or side ventures. That money went into the family's overall pool. With 3 wives lost, those streams ran dry. Now where there once had been 4 women paying bills, there was only Robyn. And though she had worked in the past, she depended largely on Kody for security. And suddenly the empire he boasted of was on fumes. Legal costs of separations and disagreements were added to the chaos. Even when the divorces were not fought in conventional courtrooms. Asset separation is not free. Lawyers, forms, mediation, all sucked the Brown family money dry, and the vehicle. It was the first tangible victim of this economic meltdown. If you thought the repossession was humiliating, just wait until you hear about the taxes. Local reporters and fans have discovered several instances where Kody and his wives were in arrears on property taxes on the Coyote Pass land. Public records indicate late payments, penalties, and rolling balances that betray just how tight money has been. Though some of the taxes ultimately did get paid, the fact that they kept falling behind suggests very real questions about Kody's financial security. Neighbors chattered about foreclosure rumors, and fans on forums accused Kody of living beyond his means. And each missed payment poured oil on the flames. Could foreclosure be next? Many think so. The most pitiful aspect of Kody's secret financial debacle is the discrepancy between his public persona and private turmoil. On television, he seemed self-assured, cruising around in his prized vehicle, discussing the creation of dreams, and bragging about his future vision. However, in private, the picture was very different, waking up at nights in anxious fear of bills, debt letters mounting, bank call blow-offs, past due property taxes, wives walking out, income dwindling, and expenses piling up. It's the rags to riches tale of a person who attempted to live larger than life permitted. And when you live in debt long enough, the deluge of reality always hits home. For Kody, losing his vehicle was horrible. But for critics and fans, it was metaphorical. If he couldn't keep up on a car payment, what was next? Rumors started circulating online. Would the bank next repossess one of the homes? Could Coyote Pass be repossessed for back taxes? Was Kody secretly selling assets to keep his business afloat? Insiders say the repossession was merely the first of a series of financial woes on the horizon. And as much as Kody may want to dictate the storyline, banks don't care about television ratings. They are concerned about getting paid. When you take a step back, the repossession and the financial debacle that follows it speaks volumes of a larger narrative. Not about Kody, but about the Brown family empire as a whole. For years, they created a brand of polygamy, togetherness, and making it work. But beneath the smiles was fiscal pressure, secret debt, and choices that defied reality. Now, with the family broken and income streams dwindling, Kody is left vulnerable. The car can be taken, but issues persist. And short of a drastic change, this might be merely the beginning of a far more significant collapse. Everything you've built, gone in an instant. That's how one viewer summed up the jaw-dropping fall of Kody Brown, a man who used to boast that he was at the head of a vast polygamous empire. To the outside observer, Kody seemed to have it all: 4 wives, almost 24 children, a successful reality TV show, several houses, and ambitions to construct a giant compound on Coyote Pass. But now the cracks are wider than ever. The repossession of his prized car wasn't merely an embarrassing public spectacle. It was a flashing red siren, announcing to the world that the powerful Brown dynasty is disintegrating from within. And the million-dollar question now? What's next for Kody Brown? And does this mark the start of his downfall? A man at rock bottom. When that tow truck took away Kody's beloved car, something in him cracked. For years, his sense of self had been wrapped up in appearances. The cars, the houses, the alpha male persona he presented to sister wives. The car wasn't just a vehicle. It was his trophy, his indication that he was still boss. Without it, Kody appears vulnerable. Insiders say he's been irritable as ever, yelling at the people around him, and having a hard time owning up. Instead of taking blame, he reportedly blames the wives who divorced him, the children who took their mother's sides, and even the producers of the show for ruining his image. Here's the reality. Kody's ruin wasn't the result of someone else. It took years to happen, and all along there were signs. The Brown family was originally presented as a family unit, a new testament to plural marriage flourishing despite everything. Today, though, it's broken beyond comprehension. Christine walked away, taking back her independence and refusing to be a part of what she referred to as a loveless marriage. Janelle trailed behind her, opting for freedom from financial involvement. Meri, who spent years in seclusion, finally conceded there was nothing to save. That leaves Robyn, the sole remaining wife, But in lieu of a triumphant union, their marriage is now a burden weighing both of them down. With Robyn financially dependent on Kody, and Kody trying desperately to maintain appearances, the happily married couple resembles more of an agreement to survive. And without the wives, the family empire that they collectively constructed together, homes, finances, even the reputation has collapsed. For years, viewers questioned Kody's decisions, but now the public opinion has shifted nearly entirely against him. Social media feeds, fan sites, and online forums are full of criticism. He's finally getting what he deserves. Kody thought he was above it all, but now the truth is out. First the car, next the land, then everything else. The repossession has been made symbolic. To audiences, it symbolizes justice. Karma finally catching up to a man who for years prioritized ego over family. And the more Kody attempts to spin the narrative, the more audiences resist. In public opinion, Kody is losing, and losing big. Nothing symbolizes Kody's failure more aptly than Coyote Pass. Once it was intended to be the jewel in the crown of the Brown family narrative, the land upon which they would all come together, live in harmony, and demonstrate their lifestyle was viable. Now it's a desolate expanse of barren ground, weeds and bills that haven't been paid. Local news sources indicate property taxes have consistently gone past due. Whispers abound that without payment catch-up, foreclosure might actually become a likely scenario. Just imagine the very ground that was going to be his legacy being confiscated by the government and sold at an auction to the highest bidder. If the repossession of the car was a public embarrassment, losing Coyote Pass would be the ultimate badge of shame. The repossession has also put Kody's finances in the public eye. When the magic wore off, fans and media started digging up every public record they could get their hands on. What they found made grim reading. Several instances of delinquent property taxes, skyrocketing mortgage payments on homes no longer occupied by wives or children, contraction of income from the TV series as viewers decline and cast members refuse to shoot, lawyers' fees from breakups and property disputes. It's that snowball effect. Once you get behind on something, everything else begins sliding. The car was only the beginning. Experts say that if the situation doesn't turn around drastically, the houses, the land, even future earnings could be lost. And if the TLC paycheck disappears, what's left to sustain Kody? Beyond the money, beyond the homes, beyond the show, there is a man disintegrating emotionally. For years Kody lived on control. He was the patriarch, the decision maker, the one that everyone relied on. But now with his power stripped away and his finances laid bare, he's confronted with something he's never had to deal with before: accountability. Family sources reveal him to be bitter, angry, and uncooperative. His children, several of whom are now grown, allegedly have little use for him. Relationships are tense, phone calls are not returned, and holidays are spent apart from him. For a guy who used to say family was his top priority, the harsh reality is his family has gone on without him. This is the question fans keep asking themselves. Where is Kody Brown headed from here? Some of the possibilities are already making the rounds. Bankruptcy. If finances get completely out of hand with all these debts, bankruptcy might be his only hope of starting over financially. Foreclosure, unless property taxes and mortgages get paid, one or more houses or even Coyote Pass might be foreclosed on. Suits, money, or asset disputes with ex-wives might take him to court. Show cancellation. With declining wives and dwindling ratings, TLC might conclude Sister Wives has served its purpose, eliminating the last significant source of revenue. Both situations point to the same thing. Kody's hold on his empire is slipping quicker than ever. It's worth stopping on the car one more time, because in many ways it says it all. For Kody, it represented success, independence, and power. To lose it demonstrated to the world what he's been keeping hidden: debt, instability, and desperation. Cars can be replaced. But what the repossession actually symbolizes is the downfall of his meticulously built image. And once an image is broken, there's no repairing it. The ultimate haunting question for Kody Brown is this: what will his legacy be? He had once hoped to be remembered as a man who redefined family, who demonstrated plural marriage was possible, who created something remarkable. Instead, his legacy threatens to be remembered for something quite different: shattered marriages, bankruptcy, repossession forms, and an empire toppled by ego and incompetence. And perhaps the greatest irony, as Kody stumbles, the wives who abandoned him are prospering. Christine has fallen in love again, Janelle has discovered independence, and even Meri has carved out a new life of her own. Their lives are progressing, yet Kody's is going backwards. So, where are we? Repossession of Kody Brown's vehicle might have been a sensational headline, but it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to a much larger collapse. The fissures in his empire are now apparent to all the world, and everyone is holding their breath to see what falls apart next. Will it be Coyote Pass, the homes, the TLC show, or Kody himself toppled by the same empire he struggled so hard to keep in line? One thing is sure, Kody's tale is only just beginning, but the era of him as the strong patriarch, the unassailable man at the center of a large family, is over. What follows is the tale of a man struggling to remain relevant, struggling to keep his head above water, and struggling with a reality he can no longer deny. And as the waiting fans look for the next installment, one haunting question resounds louder than ever: will Kody Brown's empire vanish altogether, or will he discover one last means of clinging to it?